Will the government get out of the way and let private industry work in 2010? Here to discuss, John Tamny, editor of Real Clear Markets, Stephen Sproul, staff writer for the National Review, and my old friend Peter Schiff, president of Euro Pacific Capital and author of Crash Proof 2.0, How to Profit from the Economic Collapse. Peter, is the government going to get out the way and let the free markets work?
I sure hope they would, but it doesn't look like they will. You know, the problem is we're in a serious economic ditch here, and we're not going to get out of it if the government keeps digging it deeper. We need the government to get out of the economy, to get out of the way, and stop just diverting resources. The government doesn't have any resources. It has to take them from the private sector in order to give them back to us. And when it does that, it undermines our economy. It makes us less productive and less competitive.
But, you know, John, the interesting thing about all of this is that we keep hearing the president take these victory laps, right? You know, the GDP is up, unemployment is down, everything we're doing is working, it's working, so let's do more. How do we fight that? How do we resist that? Do we resist that, or should we?
I think we should definitely resist it. I think we need to get back to first principles. There's nothing in the Constitution that empowers the federal government to oversee economic growth. And so in that sense, I very much agree with Peter here. The government has no resources of its own, and so we need to stop empowering it by virtue of it taking money from the private sector in order to give it back. Economic depressions are a misnomer. They cannot occur if government is doing very little, and if the government would just get out of the way, the economy would be fine.
But let's get Stephen in here, though. Stephen, where do you see all of this going? Because you know, I hear a lot of people who know better, particularly professionals on Wall Street and other places, but it still seems to be falling on a deaf ear in Washington.
It absolutely is. And to get back to what you said in your opening monologue, nothing better embodies that we know better than you do what's best for you than the individual mandate in the health care bill that Congress unfortunately looks set to pass. I mean, this is going around and telling every American citizen that regardless of whether or not, according to their own cost-benefit analysis, it makes sense for them to have health insurance, which, by the way, is going to be more expensive thanks to the regulations in this bill, you have to have it. You have to have it or pay a fine. The IRS will be determining whether or not your health insurance plan is up to the government standards. And so, yeah, they're basically telling you, we know better what's good for you than you do, and we say that you have to have health insurance.
Well, you know, Peter, the thing is, though, is every time someone in the administration speaks, they speak from the same hymn sheet, and the first thing they say, hey, in January we were losing over 700,000 jobs a month. Now we're on a cusp of creating jobs. We created the jobs, as if the government did that.
Yeah, plus, you know, you also have to look at the difference between productive jobs and make work. I mean, just because we have more jobs in the government or more jobs in the service sector right now doesn't mean that our economy is better off. We're still losing the most productive jobs we have. We're shedding manufacturing jobs at an alarming rate. And, you know, just because the GDP is going up, it doesn't mean the economy is getting better. You have to look at why it's going up. Right now, GDP is rising because consumers are spending borrowed money and the government is spending borrowed money. And all we're doing is digging ourselves into a deeper hole. We're in more debt now than we were before the crisis began.
What's the danger of that?
Well, the danger is, in order to get out of this mess, we don't have enough savings in this country. We don't have enough production, enough manufacturing, and enough investment. That's what we need to do. We can't spend our way out of this crisis. We can't borrow our way out of this crisis. We have to produce and work our way out of it, and we can't do that with the government interfering in the economy. So essentially what you're saying, no, Peter, is we have to go through a certain amount of pain as a nation. We have to suck it up as a nation and before we can really come out of this the right way. Absolutely. But unfortunately, based on what we're doing now, we're going to have to suck up a lot more pain over a much longer period of time because the government refuses to allow the free market to function.
You know, John, I read where you actually wrote that you thought a lower GDP was actually a better sign for the economy. Explain that to me.
Well, the reason for that is what drove down the revised GDP number was a higher, quote, trade deficit. Now, to me, a trade deficit is a misnomer. They don't exist. But what they do signify in economic terms is that foreigners are complementing us with imports, not to mention that they are complementing us with increased foreign investment in U.S. companies. And so the higher trade deficit drove down GDP. And I would just add one other thing to this. I have a problem with this notion that we need to experience pain to get back on track. Implicit there is that the government propping up things that were bad for the economy is somehow helping us. I think it would be very cleansing and good for the economy to let failed businesses fail, to get rid of Fannie and Freddie and a lot of these things bringing down
But
the
John,
economy.
you would
This
agree
be
also
painful.
that people who worked at those failed businesses would experience a certain amount of pain. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I know Ronald Reagan and Paul Volcker took that route, and initially their popularity went down the tubes, and America did experience a whole lot of pain before things got better.
I see what you're saying there, but I think we all agree here to stimulate any company to prop it up is to depress other aspects of the economy. So by virtue of propping up the Fannies and Freddies, the GMs, the Chryslers, we're by definition depressing other more productive sectors in the economy. So I don't buy the pain argument even there. What we're seeing is propping up failed concepts that are destroying capital. The unseen here is what businesses would sprout up out of nowhere, the Microsofts, the Googles, that would sprout up if the government were not propping up failed entities that are making us weaker, not stronger, and unhappier, not happier.
Peter?
Yeah, you know, a lot of the pain, though, is going to be for politicians who are going to have to level with the American people and tell them the truth. Politicians are afraid that they might not get reelected if they have to deal with these issues. But sure, everybody's not going to share equally in the pain. Some people will immediately benefit if we stop artificially stimulating the economy. You know, the politicians, it's easy for them to claim credit for saving a job. But what they don't see is the jobs they destroy in the process, the more productive jobs they destroy. Sure, a lot of people are going to be upset if the government gets out of the way and lets housing prices come down and lets certain businesses fail that need to fail. But in the long run, that's the best thing that can happen to the economy, and it's not going to take that long. Free markets work pretty quickly to purge these imbalances from the economy. It might only take 6 months or a year, and then we'll have real growth. Right now, we're creating the next Great Depression, only this is going to be an inflationary depression.
Stephen, do you agree